Number 5. The Great Heathen Army, 865 to 878. Probably the most legendary Viking invasion of the British Isles. This invasion is remarkable for capturing the most territory and being one of the most successful invasions on this list. Not surprising when you consider the fact that the army was led by 4 out of the 5 sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, the legendary Viking king that everyone won't shut up about. But despite the fact that he is a legendary figure, no one really seems to know what he did. I certainly don't. You may wonder how big this army was, and while sources differ, the general consensus is that the army was not bigger than a few thousand men. Yeah, the Anglos must have either been one of the worst organized peoples of this time, or must have had such a big case of PTSD from the previous Viking raids that they just gave up. When they first landed in East Anglia, the king there paid them off to make sure that he was not one of their enemies, and let them camp there until they went north for York. The Northumbrians there paid them yet again to go away, but even with that, they could not help establishing a vassal kingdom for themselves in Northumbria. Thinking themselves done in York for now, they departed for Mercia and took the city of Nottingham. Anglos be as Anglos are, they were pissed at the Vikings for taking the city, and so Mercia and Wessex would combine their forces to cast the Vikings out. They besieged the city, and yeah, that didn't really go in the English's favor, so they once again just ended up paying them to leave. After this, they returned to York and presumably stayed there to party, only to turn back after having way too much to drink and invaded East Anglia, the kingdom they originally kicked off their invasion from. They were once again victorious in their endeavors, and would after this be reinforced by another army from Scandinavia, and then go on to invade Wessex. They didn't do a very good job at that though. They got the leader of the new army killed by this guy called Alfred, only to be paid to leave yet again. They therefore retreated back to London, and kinda just went around the land for a bit after this. They tried invading Mercia again, but was yet again paid to leave by the Mercian king, only to return a year later and throw him out. The army split into 2 groups after this. One headed north to have a gay old time with the Picts and the Scots, only to settle in Northumbria after that, while the other would move down to Wessex. They were successful here, but then signed an agreement with Alfred, saying that they would finally leave this time. But the Vikings, being as they were, thought that was kinda gay, so they returned to take it all. Finally realizing that you gotta do everything yourself, Alfred finally beat them at the Battle of Edington in 878. This finally created peace between the leaders of the Viking invasion and the Anglo-Saxons, and any last remaining Viking force was eventually dealt with. But don't you worry about them, for because of this, England was now split into 2, the Danelaw and the Anglo-Saxons. This meant that a whole lot of Norsemen could now move into Northumbria to party and stay there permanently, and while they now had to care about not ruining the soil by partying, most considered this a fair trade anyways. I give this one a bigness rating of 8 out of 10, an impact rating of 10 out of 10, and a success rating of 8 out of 10. Number 4. 1066 Part 1. After finally attaining peace in Norway, after several years of having been exiled to Russia, joining the Varangian Guard, and warring with Denmark, Harald Hardrade was now ready to go on one of the biggest Viking invasions of England ever, being the rightful heir to the English throne due to some complicated middle-age marriage stuff that I haven't really looked into. He readied 195 longships to sail for the British Isles in March of 1066. They sailed away, arriving in Orkney and the Shetlands and gaining local ships and soldiers on their way to York in September. By the time they had arrived, his force had grown to a massive army of 15,000 men and over 200 longships. He sailed along Northumbria, burning any village that dared to oppose his reign. They landed outside of York in Ricca and began their actual invasion. They were met by the forces of the Earls of Mercia and Northumbria. They were however no match for Harald, and were crushed decisively in the Battle of Fulford. With the local forces having been dealt with, York surrendered to Harald, and the King of England himself, who was also named Harald, just in a weird way where you have an O instead of an A, had also arrived in Northumbria. Harald did not know about this, however, and was gonna meet the Yorkers to decide who their next ruler was gonna be. Harald arrived at the meeting point they agreed upon, Stamford Bridge, and as he did, spotted the entire English army, heavily armoured and grouped up for battle. The snake that he was, Harold the English had planned a sneak attack on Harald the Norwegian. Harald was doomed, but a single Norwegian soldier met the Englishmen at the bridge, holding them off alone until someone got the genius idea of poking his balls with a spear from under the bridge. This had given Harald enough time to set up a proper fighting formation. Though ill-suited to fight, the Norsemen gave it their all, but to no avail. They fought and died like proper fucking men, and because they weren't no pussies wearing chainmail, an arrow found its way to Harald the Norwegian's neck and promptly killed him, ending the invasion in failure. I give this one a bigness rating of 9 out of 10, an impact rating of 8 out of 10, and a success rating of 2 out of 10. Number 3, 1066, Part 2. Now, if your education hasn't failed you completely, you know who else invaded England in the year of 1066 AD. That's right, the Normans. But now, you might be saying to yourself, right, I know the Normans were descendants from Vikings and all, but to call it a Viking invasion of England is going a bit far, Blop. Let me tell you, I hear you loud and clear, and to that I say...
Å herre min hatt.
Anyways, with Harald now dead, the second best contender to the English throne would arise. And you all know how this story goes, don't you? William battled at Hastings, English confused, William win, simple as. Great, now Britain is French. Now I give this one a bigness rating of 8 out of 10, an impact rating of 10 out of 10, and a success rating of 10 out of 10. Number 2, Sweyn Forkbeard, 1013. After having sailed on a lot of raids to England earlier in his life, helping a certain someone mentioned earlier on this list, the now King of Denmark, Sweyn Forkbeard, decided it was high time he would have a go at taking the Kingdom of England in 1013. This, by accident, created one of the largest empires in Northern Europe's history, encompassing all of Denmark, Norway and her possessions, and England at the time. But I am getting ahead of myself here. The invasion itself was fairly standard, you know, rowing up the River Humber and laying siege to London with a massive enough army. Pretty standard stuff. There was a defector though, that was probably interesting. When he invaded England, he realized that the English were even bigger pansies now than before, thus giving their king the title of Athelred the Unready. Sounds like a bitch-ass king to me. Yeah. So yeah, anyways, despite being Danish, he was able to conquer England and make a big ol' empire. This new empire ended up being really big, though both it and Sweyn wouldn't live long after its creation. Sweyn died like 5 weeks after he was coronated King of England, like the Dane he was, though his son Knut would take his seat in England after his death. Then he was thrown out, but returned again with a vengeful spirit and a huge army in 1016. He stayed there until 1042, probably being a great guy, despite being Danish, since they do call him Knut the Great. I give this one a bigness rating of 8 out of 10, an impact rating of 9 out of 10, and a success rating of 10 out of 10. They do get some minus points though for being Danish. Wait, why is this above the 1066s again? Number 1, Olaf Gottfridsson, 937 to 941. Wow, this one was just massive. Just like something else I know. This is basically the Viking dream story, instead of the American dream. The ultimate tale of rags to riches in the early medieval world. We don't have many sources on this guy's early life or where he came from, but it is said that he, like Sihtric and Ragnar before him, was a great-grandson of Ivar the Boneless, one of the leaders of the Great Heathen Army. He was born in the time that the racists in Ireland from earlier had thrown the Norse out of Dublin and grew up surrounded by war. During his youth, he went on many raids, even though he was assumedly the son of the King of Dublin. When the King of Dublin died, Olav took the throne rather quickly. There were local rivalries going around between the different Norse cities in Ireland at the time, so that was as good of an excuse as anything to unite these cities and establish control over them all before heading for his real goal, which yet again was Northumbria. So he swiftly moved to the biggest rival for Dublin in Ireland, Limerick, and would go on to destroy its fleet in the Battle of Limerick and taking its king hostage. This was to ensure the loyalty of Limerick, as well as to gain soldiers and resources. Now, no one in Ireland could stand against him or his army, and he was able to achieve the title of King of all Norse in Ireland. With this, he could now finally go for what was essentially the real-life equivalent of Valhalla for Vikings at the time. But by this point, England had basically united, and Northumbria was in the hands of one of the most powerful kingdoms on the British Isles. But honoring their traditions, the Scots and the Picts in the north hated this fact as well, and set up an alliance for a secret invasion of Northumbria together with Olav. With this alliance, and possibly the largest ever Viking army in British history at his ready, Olav set out to take Northumbria and rid the world of the snake that was Athelstan. He sailed over to Northumbria with 600 ships and joined the offensive. But Athelstan, being the snake he was able to slither together a huge force incredibly quickly, and met the coalition at Brunanburh, an incredibly big battle where a united English force first stood under one king against a massive foreign invasion. Unfortunately for world history, the English won, and a sense of Englishness was born in Britain, while Olav scrambled together his fleet and sailed back to Dublin after having survived the battle. Luckily for Olav, however, the snake would finally choke, and Athelstan was dead by 939. This meant that Northumbria was back in control of local Scandinavian partymen once again, and Olav could easily assert his dominance. With him scaring the shit out of the other Norse rulers there, he was finally able to seize power over Northumbria, and would go on to either raid or invade England as far down south as Derby. Truly, living one of the highest lives imaginable. I give this one a bigness rating of 10 out of 10, an impact rating of 10 out of 10, and a success rating of 10 out of 10. Hell yeah! Well, there you have it. My picks for the top 10 Viking invasions of the British Isles. A pretty fun time all throughout, if I do say so. If only Viking reenactment was even 1% as fun as the real deal. How come I will never be able to raid English shores with the boys? Plop, we have a civilization now? Shut up, I don't want to hear it. I know exactly who is to blame. It is all the eternal Anglos' fault all along. They wanted to civilize Scandinavia so they wouldn't have to face more raids like the hecking pansies they are. They couldn't face real men, and so they wanted to feminize everyone else in this common courtesy, politeness crap. Is this all related to the Trolls conspiracy? Wait, can the Anglos be behind that one too?